It's that's like because the guy like this you can control, so it'd be like you came into this with me and I just say random shit to you to make it hey, I'm gonna have my hotel and then I'm like, you gotta give me $50, you know, and then you give me the deposit as cash. And I didn't have a credit card. You're like, well, I just gave you $50. Like, but you didn't. I needed a credit card deposit. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's how we run the business. And you're sitting there like, what? I'm just fucking with you. I'm just doing this. Dude, but he's crazy. It's just you have to think because he's crazy. It's just it's crazy. It's weird. I can't even see how you're in control.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. It's going to be a little bit awkward. I don't have this screen working, so somehow I'll have to turn around here and start coding. So, yeah. Hello. Oh, this is not working. I don't know. I'll try to speak louder. But this screen is not working, and this is my screen where I code, so I'll be a little bit slow. So you guys will able to complete the exercises before I complete. What is it?
You have to look at that screen on this screen.
Yeah, it's not working.
Typing?
Yeah, I cannot see it. I know it's not working. Anyway, I don't want to waste more time on it. Yeah, that's what I'll be like on the side. Okay. All right, so everything is good. I slacked out the link for the presentation. Let's move this over here so I can see. All right. So today we are kicking off week 13. All right. Week 13. Did everybody read my? Yeah, it's crazy. Read my Slack message. All right. So traditionally, what I've seen, week 13 is probably one of the toughest week that you guys will encounter. And the reason what happens is because I'll go through it. So 13, 14, 15, just before project 2 are kind of little bit more tougher than what we have seen. All right. So what is the reason? So initially, before project 2, we completed what the technologies that we studied. They were primarily focused on the front end part, right? We did the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and all that stuff, right? At that point, we did all the front end stuff, okay? And then up till today, we've been looking at Node.js as kind of backend, right? That's what we've been looking at. So Node.js code, we'll be using terminal. We run our code in terminal. Everything shows up and all that stuff. Now, from this week until 15, we are going to see how to connect our backend with our front end. So eraser here. There's no eraser. Sure. What you gonna find it? Yeah. Yeah, it's probably in the other room. I'll get it in a while. So from today we will see how to connect the front end with our Node.js code. How do we talk between what goes over here? Okay. So I mean it looks easy, but when I explain, a lot of people get confused. The reasons are Node.js again is in JavaScript. You will be writing some code that is in JavaScript, and both of this code will actually be residing at one place. That's what confuses people a lot. So we'll see what do I mean that both the code from my front end and code from my back end are going to be in one box. My front end code and my Node.js code. Okay?
In one box.
We'll see what I mean by that. But that's the confusing part. That's what confuses people a lot. So I'll be having I'll be in the same project, and I will also have my front-end code and my Node.js code. That's what confuses people a lot because they're debugging the front-end code, which is also in JavaScript. They're trying to debug, and suddenly they come into Node.js, and it's still JavaScript, and that's what people confuse. So they are using the Node package Axios, and they try to use it in the front end. Guess what? It's not going to work. They try to use a FS file system code or whatever. It's not going to work on the front end part. It only works over here. So we'll see what it means. All right. So that's the confusing part. But I have learned, so I'm going to make sure you guys hopefully don't fall in that trap, especially when you're doing project 2. Okay.
So the front end code and the back end code is gonna be in one file?
We'll see. Not one file. I said one place. One place. One project. One box or one project. That's what not one file. No. They both are not going to be the one file. They're probably going to be the one place. We'll see what that place is. Okay, that's what we'll be doing this week, next week, and until week 15. Okay. Now, what I'm going to show you today is the concept. I would appreciate, please focus on the concept. Don't worry about the code today, right? Or we'll be doing some coding part, but don't get hung up on the syntax and the coding part today. All right. I'm going to show you how to do this using vanilla Node.js. We can call that, right? Which means is just using Node.js libraries without using any third party. On Saturday, you're going to see Express. That kind of takes the burden from writing a lot of code, and Express is what you will be using a lot. But I won't cover Express today. Today is all about concepts and how do we translate these concepts into Node.js code. All right. If you understand the concept, what will happen is you will not fall in this trap. This one. You exactly know what's going on. Okay. And the reason is we are full stack developers. We have to do the front end and also we have to do the back end part. All right. Now again, previously, oops. Let's see if I can select this. What we have done is we have done these individually. We have done the front end part. We have done the Node.js part. Now we need to make sure how do we connect both those pieces to make our application working. Okay. All right. Let's see. It's appropriate for the month of May, right? Yeah. There you go. All right. Some of the things I've seen, and I know a lot of the people are following, or at least I saw in Slack initially before Project 1, this was going on. I don't know if it is still. You guys are doing this, the study group thing. Do you guys still do it? I know there was a lot of chatter. It kind of died down. Yeah. And it's not anything new. It happens. I've seen people like come in strong and they're like, yeah, that's what I said. Divide your energy. And this is the week that you need that energy. Again, it's a good suggestion. Study group kind of helps. Some people know concepts better. You can learn from them. And again, I may not be able to explain the way that you guys are understanding, but maybe some of your peers are able to maybe explain it better. So I would, again, if you haven't, this is a good time to, maybe form a group and try to, work on the exercises. Okay? I haven't done study group in a while because I haven't been to school in a while. But what I have done is done interviews. I get together with some friends, maybe do a Skype call or something, and ask them, hey, help me out, or I help them out do a mock interview, or we try to solve some of the lead code problems together. If we both are kind of applying, every few years, 3-4 years, people look for a career change in this industry, or 2 years anyway. So. We've done that before, so it kind of translates to the same thing. It's good for that too. Notes, again, I've been saying that from day one. I know a lot of people have gotten used to it, so please continue that. Today, again, please ask if you have questions. Again, all questions are welcome, but make sure that you understand the concept. So if you have any doubts about the concept, please do ask that. Okay? All right. The office hours, I know Nick, Troy, and I are kind of leaving early because nobody's here in the class for office hours now. Earlier, I remember before Project One, we used to be here until like 10:15 and 10, but now 9:45 and the whole class is gone. So, I mean, hopefully, you guys are getting it. Please make use of those hours also. All right. This is a really good one. I really like Pluralsight. And the problem, it's not a problem, but the thing is, it's a paid service. I think it's like $35. I had it for like few years. I did like good tutorials from this site, but these days I'm like not getting time to do anything. So I kind of disconnected my service for this one. But I haven't done this course personally, but what it seems like they have a really good Express.js course. Again, you can go to Udemy and look up some courses. And I know people are doing it. Every time I teach something, I know I've heard few people go back and search up Udemy courses and kind of come back with that knowledge. So please keep doing that. Okay? All right. Again, please, I know a lot of people are, they struggle with new concepts, but trust me, you guys are doing well for your first time, especially coming from a non-programming background. You are definitely doing better than me when back in like 2005 when I was graduating. For 4 years, I feel like I wasted my time, and I actually learned programming after I graduated, and I have a computer science degree. So it's tough. I understand it is a tough area. So please keep continuing. Again, what I say is go back and do those exercises. That's the only way it's going to help you, right? Again, I know we focus on the homework. It's good, but please make sure you complete those exercises. We did Node.js. We did the SQL part. I hope everybody kind of went back and completed those exercises. Maybe almost all. Okay, almost is good. Almost is good.
Together, and it's like something doesn't work. And we're like, F this.
Right.
Watch TV now.
Wow. That's you take a break, of course. If you're stuck for 2 hours, either ask help, take a break, and come back. I'm telling you, it happens. I go, I take a break, I come back, and the solution is right there. And it's usually just one line of code. I kind of disappointing, but that's what happens. It's not unusual. Okay. Again, we saw this slide. I'm going to just skip to the next one. All right. So this is where we start. Let me see. Hey Nick, are you going outside? Can you get an eraser from me, please? Yeah, thank you. I think it might be in our classroom. All right. So when I started Node.js, this was the question. All right. Do you guys understand what a server is? High level, somebody shout it out.
Oh,
What is a server?
it's holding data.
It's what?
Something with data stored.
Storing data. Okay.
You send a request and it responds.
Okay.
Oh.
Right. It's a physical box also, right? That's what we kind of. Right. Exactly. So
Applications.
it has applications. So it is basically both code or software and also a physical device. That's what a server is, right? Okay. And as Michael was saying, Blair, Joffrey put it, Randy, that a server is what takes in requests and sends a response back. That's what we call it, server, which is the right definition. Okay. I just want to make sure everybody understands before we move on to this part. Okay. What are some of the examples of server side? Some of these you are familiar. The second one, APIs. We've been building APIs. Well, we haven't built an API. We have used, but we have enough Node.js knowledge to kind of go into this part, and that's what we'll be looking in these coming weeks. Okay. The first one is interesting. Visiting a URL and then being given an HTML page. Okay, I want you guys to focus on that part because that's what we are looking at today. What does this mean? According to this line, if I want to translate this to this thing, if I'm calling, let's call this a server. Okay, this is my server. Okay, and then I have a client or something which makes a call to this server. Okay, so according to the first line, what it is saying is that you type in a URL Okay? So you type in a URL www something. Oh, thank you. Okay. Here. So this is my server, okay, and then visiting URL and then being given an HTML page. So according to this is my browser, and I type in a website www.something.com, okay, and then according to the first line, what is happening? A server is returning an HTML page, okay. Everybody seeing what the first line says? So what does this mean? Where does my HTML page actually reside? Is it on the browser? Is it on the client side? Or is it actually on the server?
Server.
It's actually on the server. That's what I meant, that your front-end code is also going to be on server. So your server is a box that holds any or every code, right? Your browser is your user interface or your client, right? It doesn't have anything. It requests that HTML or page, and that's what comes back, and that's what is displayed on your browser. And then when we go into our inspector tools, we see the HTML, right? That HTML is coming from a server. Okay. Now, if my HTML is over there, what about my the endpoints, the API code, the Node.js part? Where do you think that code goes on? That's also on the server. My Node code, my API or whatever, that's also on the server. So that's what I was saying, that both your front end and your back end code are both residing on the same box, on the same server, right? What will happen is, and that's where the confusion comes, because when you're creating your project, right, you are going to most probably have the same GitLab project, which will have both your HTML, GitHub project, which will have both your index.html front-end code, and will also have your, let's call it server.js, whatever that Node.js file is. Your repository will have both of these in the same directory, right? And why? Because both of these are going to go and be deployed on your server, right? It's going to the same box. So people usually keep it on the same folder. Okay, and that's where the confusion comes in, because now people are working on this file, then they're working on some JS file over here, and they get confused that, oh, if I'm using it over here, I should be able to use it over here. Yes?
So your front end JavaScript file, so like even when we were putting in like assets and like moving them over, you would have that residing on the root with the index. Sometimes we would separate them.
Yeah, no, go ahead with your separation. This is just a basic example where I have only one file. But yeah, create your assets folder and your whatever code you have your front end. It's exactly the same thing.
Okay.
The only thing is you will have one part here, and then you will have the same structure for your Node.js code.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you will have assets, CSS, images, and everything. Everything that you have done so far. But all of this will be in the same GitHub project and will be deployed on the same server also. Yes, George?
You kind of answered my question a little bit. I was about to say, because everything needs to be under JavaScript.js, how's the best way to differentiate which one's front end, which one's back end, because a lot of people contribute to it.
There's no way. I mean, if I look at the code, I can tell you there's a difference. But I know what you're saying. But there's no like a differentiation that you can look at and you say, oh, this is my front end, this is my back end. But on the flip side, you can, because you look at your folder, you have your CSS. CSS can never be on your back end,
Yeah.
right? When you open your JavaScript file, the jQuery methods, onload, and all that stuff can never be on your Node.js, right? And there are some naming conventions that we use, right? It's the folder structure that you define in some of the Node.js files. You will see me calling it server.js, right? So that's kind of like the naming convention that kind of tells you that this is your backend code versus this is your front end code.
So even like calling to a window, that's how you're able to know the difference. Right?
What is it?
Like kind of like we're calling to a window. That's how you're able to like tell the difference between the front end and the back end, correct?
Call in into a window like a browser.
Yeah.
Yeah. You will have your HTML file. Now this .html file, can this be on your backend? It can never be on a backend. So this part is my front end code. But yes, any file that is your front end, you should be able to open it in your browser, and your Node.js never runs on your browser, so nothing will happen over there. Okay? Yes.
So Daniel, API, application programming interface, that isn't that just like the URL?
That is a URL. Yes.
So, but you have it in the server.
Yes. You're going to have it over here.
Okay. Because if I say that it's like a URL, would it be like something that's running in a browser?
It is not rendered in a. Well, depends what kind of an API is. So, if your API returns HTML, then yes, it will be rendered on your browser. If it returns a JSON, I mean, it will show up in your browser, but it will be in a JSON format, right?
Okay.
So our APIs that we are building are returning JSON. So these are kind of displayed on the browser, but it doesn't make sense. On the browser, you should only have your HTML pages being displayed. Your JSON should be being used over here somewhere. So our APIs, remember what was the return type? For our APIs, we were saying these web APIs return a JSON format. Yes, they are URLs, as would be www something, API something, but the return is always going to be a JSON. You can display it on the web page, but it wouldn't make sense.
Right. Well, I just associate those two together because they both look like URL.
They both look like URL. Yes, there's no difference between. If you don't follow certain standards, then yes, I cannot even tell if this is an API or this is a HTML page. Just looking at the URL, yes, I cannot tell. But if you follow some of the standards that in your URL you're adding API / and then your API. So when I look at this URL and I see an API in the URL, then I'm like, okay, this is if I call this is going to return me a JSON, right? Versus if I don't have an API in my URL, then I cannot tell. I'm going to assume that is going to return me a HTML page. But again, these are just the standards. Yes, so looking at the URL, you won't be able to tell if it's an API or not if you don't follow the standard, right? Because both will have the same thing, www.something.com, and then if you have an API, let's say contact. What contact does is it returns you some JSON for contacts, right? So if I call this and I say contacts, it could be an HTML page which takes me a contacts page, or it could be a JSON. I cannot tell looking at that. But from the standard, what we do is, if this is going to return me a JSON, I create a URL saying /API /contacts versus contacts. So then I can say these two and I can say, okay, this is going to return me an HTML page and this is going to return me a JSON. That's how you differentiate.
That's good.
Okay?
Yeah.
This is a good practice. So you will see when we are writing APIs, I'll show you some of the standards that are being used. It's better to follow those. Okay? All right. Let's look at the client. All right. So client already kind of explained to you what is a client. You call a URL from your browser. It goes and then it gets some data. It could be an HTML page or it could be a JSON. Okay? Everybody good with that? Okay. So the client is the one that is sending the request to the server, and the server is the one that is processing those requests and then sending a response. Remember these two keywords, request and response. We are going to be using this a lot. Okay? Request is what the server is getting, and the response is what the server is sending back. Okay? When we talk about request and response, we usually talk from the server's perspective, and that's how you'll be coding also. Okay. Now, in the beginning of the class, I said that we have done the client side, we have done the server side, we know Node.js. In this, now we need to understand how to communicate between these two. Okay? And that's what this next slide is. All right. When we started Node.js, I kind of explained how are they communicating. These are web APIs, right? If I talk about web APIs, then they are using the same URL concept that Randy was talking about. So you have your www something.com/API something, and then you get a response back. So either you'll get a HTML or you'll get a JSON. Okay? So both of these things, your server is able to process. And we'll see how we can write code that a server processes in that way. Okay? All right, any questions so far? Everybody getting the concept? All right, let's see. So what, as I was saying, that as a full stack developer, we need to know how to write the HTML part also, and we also need to know how to write the Node.js or our APIs or our backend also. Okay, so in your project 2, you will be creating your front end also and your backend also, both of them, and you'll be deploying it, and you will have more control over your backend also. Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, kind of already touched on this. All right. Again, this is what this slide is saying. That you have a server, and this is what you will designate as a server, and you will have multiple clients coming and hitting this server, right? Why? Because if you when you let's suppose you were demoing your project 1, right? So you distributed the URL to everybody in the class, and there were multiple people kind of looking at your site. So what does this mean? There were like multiple requests going to your server. Okay. For project 1, what was your server? GitHub. Excellent. Who said that? Right. So GitHub was your server. Why? Because you deployed all your code in GitHub. So basically, GitHub was your server, right? But we didn't write any code in GitHub to process requests and everything, right? We were using some of the default code of GitHub. What does it mean? That when I type in www.github.io/Randy's project, right? GitHub server knows how to process that request and send you an HTML page, which is Randy's project, right? That's what it does. Right? We didn't have any control over it. We didn't write any Node.js code. We didn't do anything with that, right? In the first project. But GitHub was our server, right? It is serving the same purpose. And in this class today, what we are going to do is we are going to look at how do we create this server. Okay. Once you have the code that your server is going to be built upon, you need a hosting place. For project 1, we had GitHub, right? But GitHub doesn't support Node.js and all that stuff. So for our next, when we want to deploy the code, our backend code, some of the services that are out there is AWS, Google Cloud, Heroku. Heroku is a free one. I think it allows you to host up to 5 projects. So if you haven't looked into it, we'll take a look at Heroku this week. You can deploy 5 projects, and it has the capability to create your whole server, to create your Node.js APIs, your Node.js code, and everything. Okay. Now in Heroku, you will be deploying your front end also, and you will also be deploying your back end, both of them. Okay. So in this class, we'll be using Heroku to fulfill this requirement. Okay. All right. But today, if you haven't deployed to Heroku, right? We cannot be deploying to Heroku every time, or once we start development, we need to make sure that it runs on our local machines, and that's where the concept of local host comes in. So in this class, at least today, our server is going to be our own laptops, which traditionally are called localhost. So we will be basically deploying and creating servers that run on our machines. Okay, so that's why this you will see localhost on the browser, and we'll see what that means. Okay, but I want to make sure you understand that our server is also on a laptop, and then our browser is also on a laptop. So basically, it simulates the server concept, but we still have the code. Both of these code, the HTML and the Node.js, are on our laptop, are on our local host. Okay, similar concept. The server is going to have both of these, right? So today, our laptop is our server. Yes.
So is it a server or it just simulates a server?
It's kind of simulates a server. The code that we are going to write, it will create a server. It doesn't matter if it is on a laptop or is it in our Heroku. The code doesn't know what's going on. The code will think that this machine is a server. It doesn't matter. Right. But nobody will be able to access it other than any client that is running on my computer on the same domain. That's the only difference. But the code that we write will run on Heroku and also will run on our computer. Okay? All right. So in this class today, we are going to be building this server. Okay. What does, let me go to the next one. That's kind of nice. Okay. So what happens is when you go to Heroku, they give you space or something. It's kind of this empty box. They say this is a server. We have given you the hardware, right? You don't have to worry about the memory and everything. If you go into the details, you will see any Heroku, they will list the hard drive space, the memory, the CPU, and all that stuff. Basically, you can assume that somebody has given you a physical box, but what it is, it's empty. It doesn't have any code running in it, and that's what Heroku does too. Okay, it gives you this box, but it's an empty box. You have a space, you have memory, you have the CPU, everything, right? But it doesn't do anything. All right. So what we are going to do is we are going to write some code. What kind of code can go in our server, right? The first part is listen. What it means is that our server should be listening for request, right? That's what a server does. It does a request and a response, right? And how does it know that a request is coming in? The keyword is the server is always listening for requests. Okay? When our server goes live, what it means is it is ready to accept a request, and the best way to accept a request is to continuously listen for something that comes in. Okay? So we are going to write our code and deploy to our server and make sure that our server is always listening for incoming request. Okay? The second is URL parse. Okay? So in my server, I have my HTML code and I have my APIs also, right? Now, how do I tell whether I need to send the HTML or do I need to send the JSON, right? That's where the URL parsing comes in. So when a request comes into your server, the server recognizes this URL /API/data, okay? And also recognizes a request, let's suppose homepage, home.html. Okay? So that's the second purpose of your server. You need to write code where your server is able to parse this URL and understand what the data it needs to send back. Okay? The first thing was listening. It should be listening for incoming requests. The second part is it should be able to look at the URL and then parse it. Okay? Again, the concept. We'll see there's code to do all of that stuff. Okay? The third important part, route handling. What it means is when it's done parsing this URL, let's suppose I have another contacts.html. Your server is able to route accordingly. What it means is it's able to send the right web page, right? When I type in www.com/home, it shouldn't be sending me contacts HTML. It should send me home HTML. And that's where the routing part comes in. Your server should be able to parse it correctly and route your code to the correct HTML page. Okay? That's where the routing comes in. Because your site is going to have multiple HTML, multiple APIs, your server should be able to route them correctly. Okay? Send HTML or send JSON. I've been talking this from the beginning. Your server should be able to recognize this and send either the JSON or send your HTML. Okay? Any questions so far? Everybody getting it, what the concept is? Okay. Receive a post request. What is a post request? What does a post request do?
Like send the data or push the data out or something.
Like an update.
Update. What do you mean push the data out? Like
Well, like
push to back to the client?
yeah, like that isn't that the end part when it goes through, decides what it's gonna do, and then it, like the end. Obviously not, because there's another box there.
No.
So-
You're right. I just want to. You are on the right path. I know what you mean. I think your understanding is correct. Maybe the words are a little bit different.
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
it to get, like, accepts an update that is being pushed to the server?
Right.
Yeah.
So as these guys are saying, it's a technically it's an insert, right? When we talk about get, we are getting the data back. When you talk about post, post means you are kind of inserting some data. You are basically sending some data to the server that it needs to store. That's what a post is. So get request is when a client sends a get request, the server gets the data and sends it back. When a client sends a post request, this means that the server should take that request and kind of store it in a database or do something with it, right? It's not the client is not requesting anything back. The client is saying, hey, I have this amount of data and I'm sending it to the server. Now make sure that this is saved somewhere. For example, you have a website which has you have to fill out a form, right? You have a website with form, you have name, age, and everything, right? You're collecting this information, right? Now you want this information to be saved to your server, right? To your database. Where does your database reside? It resides somewhere on the server. It's kind of hidden over there. So this request, you are not getting any information back. You are saying, hey, I have captured the name, age, email. Please go ahead and save this somewhere. And that request we call post. Okay?
So it stores the data the user sent.
Yes. Any data that comes from your client. That's what. So not user. We'll use a right word called client. Any data that comes from the client, your server is able to save that request.
So it saves it like unique then, obviously, like each.
Yeah. Don't worry about how it saves it, what it does it. Right now, we are concerned that post just means that I'm sending you data. You have to make sure it is persistent.
Now, is this is part of the process as it goes through? I mean, it's all happening fast, but I mean, it's sending over that data and it's basically saying, hey, decide, check and see what it is, and store all of this over there.
Exactly.
And whatever other box is going to pop up.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Yes, ma'am.
But what's an example of when the server would send a JSON back to the client? Like I've got a browser window that renders HTML.
Yeah.
What would I do with an actual JSON on the client side?
Oh, okay. So remember we were making AJAX calls. When you make an AJAX call to an API, what do you get back? Get back a JSON.
Right. But
Right.
in that case, isn't our server kind of the client that's reaching out to a third party API?
Oh no. I'm coming to that. But in that case, what is our server? That API that we are calling.
Okay.
Right. That's our server. For us, if our server is over here, is the exact same thing. Now that API, that AJAX call will exactly be the same. Now instead of calling the APIs that you guys use in your first project, you are going to call the API that you have built on your server. From your client side, does it matter? It doesn't know if it is your server or some third-party APIs. What the expectation in that AJAX call from your client is that I type in this API URL, it should give me a JSON back. I don't care where it is coming from. Now, instead of that URL, you're going to replace it with the URL of your server, and in that case, it's going to return the same data back. Now, for example, I have name, age, email. I have sent a post request. I saved it over here, right? Let's suppose you have a table in your next page where you list all the users that have signed up for your website. So what that data, where is that data going to come from? You're going to make an AJAX call to your server. It's going to be a GET request, and your server is going to recognize, parse the URL, go to your database, get the data, make a JSON, and then send it back. And you will fill your table with the user information. Okay?
So,
Does that answer your question? Okay.
and
Yes.
so when you do a post, you're not gonna get a response back, right?
Technically, we will still get a response back. The response would be saying that I have successfully received your information.
Okay.
We'll see what the response is. But you will get a response back basically acknowledging that the server received that information, I have the information, and I was able to store it, nothing bad happened, right? Because we still need the response. What happens is I send it back and the server never responds. How do I know this information has been saved? I don't know. So my expectation is I send this information, if everything is good, I come back with a good response saying, oh, I have saved everything. If it fails, right, then I have to do something else. I have to write some code to see, okay, what do I do now? Yes,
The equivalent of like a console log response.
console log response. Yeah.
Does it tell you where it is, like a location?
Good question. Here's the good part. You are writing this code, so it's your responsibility to identify where the error happened, right? Now you have complete control of your server, unfortunately or fortunately. So if you want to be specific to find out where that error occurred, yes, please go ahead and write good code over here and find that error and tell your browser that, oh, the error happened when I was trying to insert this particular column or something and it happened.
Oh, we have to make our own
Yes.
messages? No.
Because you are full stack developers, you are writing this server, you are creating this server. Again, going back to the initially, Heroku is going to give you a blank box. You have to do all of this stuff. We are going to write code. So the more logic, the more good error handling you have, the better your client will understand what's going on your backend. That's the communication. Okay? So you need good communication between your client and your server. Okay? We've used APIs from the documentation. Remember, people complain, hey, I don't know what's going on. Okay, well, now it's your turn. Let's see how well APIs you guys write. Yeah, you can make your own documentation. Right?
It's time to do it. Deadpool would back away.
Okay. Last part, it says server-side logic. Server-side logic is a box that everything else goes in. You're processing this data, you're multiplying, you're making some calculations, and then storing everything else. All of this logic goes on your server. Okay. Now, what I say is, any complex logic, my recommendations is do not keep any complex logic on your client side. Always keep your client thin. That's what we mean. That your client is dumb. It doesn't know what to do with this information, right? Your server is the one that is intelligent, that kind of knows everything to do. Any complex logic, algorithms, sorting, please do it on your server. That's my recommendation. I've seen some code that kind of shifts the responsibility from your server to your client. And my argument is you have gigabytes of disk space over here, disk space. You have 4 CPU cores. You have like a lot more things running on your server. And your browser is a meek laptop and maybe somebody's opening an Internet Explorer, I don't know. And you are expecting that this client is going to do all that processing when you have all this space available over here. So that's my logic, that please keep your complex logic over here. Do everything over here. just send a simple JSON that your client can just fill out the blanks and done. Okay?
Isn't that the object behind caching, so that you can render responses quicker?
Right. That's what does caching mean? Caching means is that you got some data back. You got some data is like JSON, and you got it back. And if you're requesting the same data which hasn't changed, then you just use your cache and show it, right? But still, what my point is, you don't do these calculations. So because the first time you have to build a cache, right? It's not going to be there the first time, right? And then you will be doing a lot of complex queries over here, and then build that cache, right? The first time is going to take time, right? And what if your data kind of frequently changes? Let's suppose a stock market or something kind of frequently changes. You cannot be keeping updating your caches and expect that the response is faster. Okay. Again, it's a good question, but I don't think cache is the answer to say that all this power that I have over here just shifted over here because I have cache capability over here. Okay.
Think about Rust.
Thinking about what?
Rustful.
Oh, RESTful?
Yeah.
RESTful is server. Yes.
I thought it ran in the browser.
It runs in the browser, but where do you write your RESTful APIs? They reside over here.
Yeah.
You're calling them on the server, but you're writing your APIs, your RESTful APIs on the server. So you are at the right location.
It stores
Yes.
the logic in the client.
No, it stores the logic over here. The logic on the client is if I type in /API/data, I'm going to get a JSON back and I'm going to show it. Now, creating that JSON, the logic is over here. We'll see. When you write your APIs, what are your APIs sending? You're sending a JSON, right?
Sending it JSON or receiving it JSON?
Well, no, from your server side. Okay, so from your client side, you're receiving a JSON, right? Where is that JSON being built? Is it being built over here, or is it being built over here? Right? You're going to build it over here. So this is where your RESTful APIs are. They have the complex logic of building your JSON, which is correct. Okay? So the client just receives a dumb JSON where they can just one-to-one mapping and display it. Yes.
So, so like right now, we're using our laptops as the server and as the client side, right?
Right.
Okay, but then you're thinking about in the future when we're not doing that and the server is somewhere else, and then we're like keeping most of our code in there.
All of your code,
All
not
of
even
it.
most. All of your code
Okay.
is going to be deployed somewhere.
Okay.
But again, you don't have to worry about your laptop or somebody else or some place else. The code is exactly the same. So treat it the same way the code that you're going to deploy versus on your computer. The purpose of saying that was that the website, you will see it shows up, the URL will be localhost something. So that's what I wanted to say, that I'm going to be using my laptop instead of deploying it somewhere today. In the next class, you'll deploy it in Heroku. You'll have all the code over there. But for now, it doesn't matter if it is over here or in Heroku. Still, the logic and everything, the standards still apply. Okay? Yes.
So for local development, the browser is the client and the files are the server, right?
Yes, your browser is the client, and then there's a Node.js code that is your server. Yes. Yep. And Heroku also is the same case. Your pages are residing on your server. When somebody requests, they kind of go over there, and then your server parses and then finds the right page and then sends it back. And we'll write some code and that will clarify a bit more. Okay? All right. Let me go back here. Okay, any questions so far? Oh, you already had questions, but more questions. Yes.
Okay, but then you said keep all of the code on the server.
Yes.
Right. But I was just thinking about when you said like don't keep complex code on the client side.
Right. And you are not keeping.
But you're saying like don't keep any code on the client side, or like
I'm
it's
saying
all on the
don't
server.
keep complex logic. I'm not saying don't keep any code. I'm saying
Okay.
don't keep any complex logic. And what do I mean by complex logic is, let's suppose you take in some numbers over here, and then you have a super complex algorithm like Google that kind of gives you some kind of a prediction. Okay, based on some numbers, it will tell you what's the next lottery number, let's suppose. And it's a super complicated algorithm. So you type in these three numbers and it gives you, let's suppose, the right lottery number that's coming out next week. Okay? Now, behind guessing what the lottery number is, there's a complex logic. Let's suppose it takes in a lot of stuff, it takes a time, it needs some CPU to process that information and come with the right number. Okay? Now this complex logic, the code for that, I'm saying don't write it on your JavaScript side, on your HTML. What I mean by is you take in these three numbers and you start writing your JavaScript file with jQuery and say, oh, if these three numbers are there, then write this logic over there. It's complex. It takes a lot of power to take these numbers and come up with the right number. Let's suppose a algorithm is complex. So what I'm saying is this logic, you put it on your server, which has a lot more power, a lot more CPU power that it can dedicate to this logic. It does all its calculation and just sends you this number, one number back. Your client doesn't even know what happened. Your client just sent these three numbers to your server, and your server did a super complex logic which took up a lot of memory and CPU, but it came with the right answer, and it just sent back saying, oh, 35 is your answer. That's what. So this complex logic, keep it over here, not on your browser.
This is like
That's what I mean.
after you put everything in the server,
Mhm.
then just like when your client's interacting with it. then-
Yes. Yes. And what do I mean by client is anybody else's machine who doesn't have this much power, right? Somebody who's running a really low, like a low configuration machine where internet runs perfectly. What happens is from your client side, you are just sending these three numbers. That's not a heavy operation. You just have to make a GET request or a POST request and send these three numbers. That's it. You are done. And then you're receiving just one number. See? From the client side, it's super simple. It doesn't know. But this is where everything is happening. And that's why the backend gets paid more. Because they are the ones who are writing this complex logic. Okay? All right. I think the local host part kind of threw you off. Maybe that's what's confusing. I'm not sure if that's the case. Yes.
So it's kind of just like a real life situation. So like when I'm thinking about is like TurboTax, you put all your information
Yeah.
into the client. And
Exactly.
the server runs everything.
That's a really good one.
And then it tells you what your tax.
That is really good one. Yeah, that's a really good one. So you see, he's saying TurboTax, that you fill out everything, and you think your browser is doing. I mean, somebody will go and whatever the complex logic is, you can look at the calculation and make your own website, right? You see what's happening. So I don't want my algorithm exposed to. If I do every calculation over here, my patented algorithms are kind of visible to the whole world. So that's why you kind of hide it over here and just simply give them, oh, you're going to get $500 back. The client doesn't even know what happened over here. Yep. That's where you hide all your patented algorithms and everything. That's where everything goes. Any other questions? Yes, yes.
So I was just talking to Blair about this. So if you pull, so say you go and inspect a page, like let's say TurboTax, will you see any of the logic? Or
No.
is it, that's all hidden?
You will never see it. That's the beauty of it. Your server is sending the number 500. That's all you will see.
You'll see just
You will
the-
only
just
see the number
CSS.
500 coming back. You will never see the algorithm that is running. Otherwise, you will have a lot more Google running around, right? Otherwise, you will have a lot more Googles running around, a lot more Facebooks, right? Google has, open up Google, you will just type it in, you will just see the text. All the logic is somewhere over here that does the searching and everything. Yep. Yeah. I know when I tell people, oh, you can right click and see the code, everybody says, oh my god, I can see the whole code. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Now you guys know, yeah, it doesn't really. I mean, it's just HTML, CSS, sure.
And an
Yeah.
Ajax request or two.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. But you don't know what's going on over here, how Google is working, and how Facebook is connecting all those dots. Yes.
So, just in a general sense, is the back of the code somewhere in the subdirectory or redirectory of the website, or is it separate from it, so it's completely isolated?
Good question. Usually, it's isolated. They kind of keep it elsewhere. But for our case, it's not as complex. So we begin with keeping on the same thing. But out there in the industry, you will see your backend code is completely, even a different GitHub repo, different everything. They both are kind of isolated. And they have, this code has a lot more security. You have to pass in tokens and blah, everything, versus the code over here. So yeah, it's kind of isolated.
So Daniel, so when you said at the beginning that, there's codes, we're free to use other codes, that's not for backend, right? I guess.
Free to use other codes?
Yeah, coders, you can snippets and stuff, so that's most for front end, right? For backend,
Yeah, the cool stuff, they're
the cool
not.
stuff.
Right.
That's what I'm saying, because you said you're keeping backend mostly somewhere safe.
There's still open
So
source.
you don't-
Yeah, there's still open source people will share, but depends on what your use case is. Let's suppose you are building a website for your project and you stumble upon some super code that you think is going to resolve some issue, right? Maybe it will make your processing faster, or your compression logic will be faster, right? You come up with this code and you don't want to share it with somebody, so what you will do is you will create an API and you will say, hey, you can use my API, but I'm not going to tell you how I'm doing this, but yes, you can use my API. When you pass me this, I'll give you the right answer, but you won't share the logic.
Okay.
Well, unless you're like, yeah, it's open source,
Super
go ahead and do it.
But that's okay.
Yes.
So for backend, it's different.
Right, and that's, remember the APIs that we were using in the project one? You can sign up for their APIs and they'll give you the data back, but they will never share the information, where this information is coming from, or how they are calculating this information. That information is kind of proprietary. Nobody shares that. Yeah, you can use those APIs, yes, you'll get the data back, but the logic is kind of stored over here.
So you have to come up with
Right.
Okay.
But for your projects or your assignments, it won't be like super complex logic. What we'll be doing is we'll be inserting this data, retrieving this data, deleting, updating, that's it. But if as I was saying, as George was mentioning, the TurboTax thing, you type in some numbers and you come up with an algorithm over here that goes over here.
But I'm mostly curious, like in a workforce, let's say, you want to start building off something, so you pay, like, you buy? As
Right.
a company, let's say,
Yes.
so you buy that.
Yeah, and you buy, and you are still not. It depends on what you're buying.
Yeah.
Even if you buy the product, they're not sending you the code for it. They're sending you the product, which is kind of black box from your code. They will say, yeah, you can
Okay.
use our product, you can use our data, you pay us, and this is highly confidential or highly sought after data that you cannot access for freely. But hey, pay us, and we'll give you the data. Right?
The data.
They're only giving you it depends on what the contract is, but nobody gives you the code.
But-
Unless you're buying the company, then they are responsible for
So
giving you the
backend,
code.
basically, you from scratch, you come up with it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
You cannot like say, hey, I need a snippet of that.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
There was a time when I was at Walmart, we were looking at some product, and it was a really good product. It gets you, I think, what was the information? So we were building the same product in house, but there was somebody else who came and they were advertising. They had kind of cracked the whole problem out, and then one of the managers or director were like, "Yeah, this is what we are working on. Also, can you share the code?" And they were just looking at the, "Yeah, no, we are not going to share the code of you." I mean, that kind of defeats the purpose, right? We are selling you the product. We're not selling you the code. They were like, "How open are you to share that code? Because we are developing the same thing, but we need to see." They were like, "Yeah, no, that's not good. That's not how it works." Yeah. So.
We kind of have it working. Can you just give us a peek at what you
Right,
do?
yeah,
Like,
no.
hey,
started it.
we love it.
Yeah.
We're Walmart.
Yeah.
Hey, the Walmart way.
It's interesting. Actually, there was a. You guys know hackathons where people can not like hackathon, but like
No,
People come with new products, and Walmart participated at one, and they got beaten by a smaller startup. So what they did was they went out and bought the startup so that they can actually, they bought the startup.
I mean, that's what all the big companies.
Yeah, that's
say.
what they have money. They were like, well, this is the problem you're trying to solve. Why not buy the whole company? They bought the whole company.
It's crazy because
That's why you go to
a Canadian insurance company that I wouldn't have thought that I just found out about. And yeah, like on their career site, they have a lot of software engineers and developers, and they have like hackathons and stuff.
Yeah.
I never would have thought of an insurance company, but I guess it makes sense.
Yeah. Now every company has a hackathon going on, and the clause is that anything you develop, of course, they own the whole thing.
Yeah.
They'll give you like $1,500, $2,000 or something, but they own the product.
Well, we make
What-
millions.
So what do you think? Google came up with Google Maps? No, they actually bought some company startup which actually did Google Maps, and they made it Google Maps.
So I know this is.
Facebook does it.
That's why I'm huge.
Yeah, that's why you have YouTube. YouTube isn't their product.
So do you, if you come up with a, do you, patent, do you get a patent for that? Like,
Yeah, yeah, that's why you patented. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
you patented. Yep. Yep. If you come up with something which you think is a disruptor, yes, patented. No? Okay. And a lot of companies in Silicon Valley are just, I'm sure people know, are built for the purpose that somebody is going to buy them out. That's the purpose. They have a product, they have no future there. They don't think they're going to, they're like, okay, I'm here so that Google can see me, or Facebook can see me, or Snapchat can see me, and they'll buy me. And it happens, They go and somebody else has solved the problem. So they have the money, they kind of buy them out, and then the owner kind of starts another startup company. There's a lot of those.
Who invented Instagram or whatever, like one of the engineers for Google, they were in like the persuasion side of learning things. And it's crazy because all of these apps are the same. The way
Yeah.
to make money.
Right.
It makes you do crap.
All right. Let's see. Oops, all right. Any other questions? Everybody understand the concept? Okay. So, what are we doing after all that speech? We are building. We are building servers. Excellent. So we are building servers, and what language are we using?
Crap.
Come on, Node.js. So we are building Node.js servers. Yes. Right. Express is still Node.js.
Sorry, I meant assembly.
Assembly? I haven't heard of server in assembly, but that's a nice one. We have the more popular Java, Python, C++, C Sharp, all of this. So we are building servers using Node.js. So we are making Node.js servers. Express is a library in Node.js. I hope everybody now understands when I say that. Okay? All right. So today I'm not going to go into Express. I want to show you the code. You can write the same capabilities in Node.js without using any third-party libraries. But Express makes all this code kind of easier to write. You guys will see that on Saturday. But today I want to focus that everybody understands what a server is and how do you write code for a Node.js server. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and create our first server. I'm going to be typing it like this. Let's go ahead and do, let's call it first server. Okay. This is going to be a Node.js file. So traditionally you will see server.js as the starting point, which kind of indicates that all my server-side code is in this file. Okay. Now, Node.js has just like file system FS, Node.js has a library called HTTP. You can look up the documentation later. Let me show you some code. So we need to import that library. So do a require, and then it's called HTTP. Okay. and then your HTTP library has a extremely easy method called create server, and that's all. It creates a server for you. Okay, so we are going to use HTTP create server, and that is what we are going to use to create our node server, and that's it. We'll have to pass in a few arguments, we'll fix that, but this is a method that you can use to create your server. Okay, so let's go ahead and complete this. This takes in a callback function. This takes in a callback function with 2 parameters, and if you had to guess, what are those 2 parameters going to be? Excellent. Yes, request and response. So create a callback function with 2 arguments, request and response. Function request and response. Okay, and the code to handle this kind of goes over here. Okay, let me do this. Function handle request response. Can I do this? Right? Same callback function. I'm kind of making it into a new function so that the code that we see, because there's going to be a lot of code in your handle request, right? If you just keep it over here, kind of difficult to read, so I'm kind of putting it out here because we'll be adding a lot more code inside that function. Okay. So this function, if you look at the documentation, actually returns you the newly created server. All right, it sent you the instance of the newly created server. So you create a server, it's going to return you, you're going to call it an instance of your server. Right? It returns you the code that is going to run. Okay. Now, we still have to do a few more things, but if I have my this black box, remember this box? What is the first thing I need to do? We saw some boxes. Listen. So your server should always be listening. Okay, so the function, they have a nice easy function which is .listen. Okay, so Node.js is a backend server language. They have all those capabilities in their HTTP package. All right, so you are going to go ahead and listen, and this is where your server is going to start listening for incoming requests. Now, your listening server expects 2 arguments. The first is the port number. So you need to tell your server what port number it should be listening on. Okay, and the ports available to you are from 80 to 8080. These are the port numbers. You guys have seen 80, 88 everywhere. Those are the port numbers that your server is listening on. So you can pick any port number between 80 and 8080. Okay, so and then you are going to pass that port number in your listen. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow some good practices. I'm going to create a constant, right? Remember this const. I'm going to say call it port, and then I'm going to assign 8080 in it, and then I'm going to use this variable over here. Okay, right? Since it's going to be a constant, it's not changing, so I'm going to be listening on this port number. Okay, and the second is your callback function, and this callback function is when your server successfully starts listening or anything it starts listening, this is the callback function. Any logic that you want to do goes in this callback function. Okay, same as any other functions. Right? Again, you create a server, 2 steps. You create a server using the create server method, and then the server that was created, you listen. You call the listen method, so your server is now listening for incoming request. Okay, so let's go ahead and just say, if my code is good, I'm going to say Server is listening on this is going to be our HTTP, just going to be a local host, right? Because we're going to be running this from our computer, a local host, and let's go ahead and add the port number. Okay, this is just a console log message, so I can identify that this is successfully running. Okay, so if I see this message, what does this mean? This means that I was able to successfully create a server, and I'm successfully able, my server is now open to get some requests. Yes?
For the port, do we need to worry about like the industry standard defaults for must be called if we do it?
You can do it whatever you want. Yeah. But usually, I mean, every company has their it's not as easy because they have their own security system. They have a firewall and they have specific port numbers, so nobody can hack. So usually your company's kind of standard dictate what port number you will be using and all that stuff. We don't have to worry about it. But yes, out there's a lot more complex. I mean, it's the logic, the code will still remain the same, but this number you're going to get from your security team. They will be them. So because we have a firewall, we want to make sure these are the secure port numbers. You are watching on that, so any request, use this port number. But yeah, any port number you can use.
HTTP's default port is 80, has nothing
80.
to do with what we're doing.
The default what?
Like HTTP's default port is 80,
Yes, 80.
but that has nothing to do with how we just need to be consistent.
Yeah, over here, if you write your port number at 8080, then all your incoming requests are going to come to this one. Your server is going to only run on 8080. If somebody types in, well, nobody can type in because it's a local host. If I type in exactly this and then port number, then the code is going to hit my local host over here. Otherwise, it's going to not do anything. So if you have Heroku, if Heroku runs on 80, or whatever that port number is, if you type in the URL and then the port number, then your Heroku code is going to be, it's going to hit the server that your Heroku code is running on. We'll come to Heroku, but for now, yes, if I type in HTTP localhost 8080, then it's going to hit this code. Okay, we'll get to that and I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's go ahead and complete this. Now let's go ahead. So let's suppose my server is listening. If I call this, we'll see how do we call this. What's going to happen is going to come to this. It's going to receive a request and response, right? Let's ignore the request and they have a method called end. And then what you can do is you can send this logic back. Then you can send the URL back that the request came on. So I can say request.url. We'll see what happens. Okay. So what I did was when I create my server, when I'm listening, if any request that comes to my server, right, what am I doing? I'm saying send this back. It works with URL, this thing. Send this data back or send this message back to the person or whoever is calling my server. And who is calling this? This is your browser. Okay, your browser is going to make a request to your server and it's going to get back this message. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this code. And how do you run this? Same as any Node.js application. Okay, so when I see this message, what this tells me, I was able to successfully create a server and it is now listening on localhost 8080. So now in your browser, go to your browser, if you type in this URL, you will get this message back. Go ahead and localhost 8080. Okay, you see this, and this is the URL. We'll come to that what it means. But what just happened? What happened is from your browser, you type in a URL, and it hit your server because your server is running on localhost 8080, and then it received the request and it sent this back. Okay. Now, if I type in any other port number, will this work? If I type in 7, I can see, did I type in? It's not going to work. It's going to give you this. Why? Because there is no server running on localhost.:7080. Okay. Now, if I want to change this, I can change this port number to 7080. Okay, and then rerun my server, and then go back to my browser. Now this should work because I have a server that is running on this port. Okay, this is an extremely simple, basic server. Let me stop this and yes, ma'am.
What would happen if you created more than one server with the same port?
Nothing will happen. Then you will have two servers running.
But if like you put that in the web browser, use whichever one answers first.
No, whichever the port number you call, it's going to come out.
What if you made two servers defined
On the same port.
Yeah, in the same file, but you will have to put in a different.
as soon as you run it?
What is it? So what I'm not sure if this is what you mean. If I create another server on port 8080, okay, so then what do I have to do? I have to create another server. Let server 2 is equal to http dot create server handle request 2. Let's call this, and then I create another function, call it 2. Okay, it works. Let's change this a second server response. Okay, and then I can have my second server. No, server 2 dot listen on the second port. Okay, this is perfectly okay. Now what is going to happen? Now I have two servers, but they both are listening on different port numbers.
I was curious what would happen if both port numbers
Both port numbers were the same. I
Error,
wouldn't.
wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's going to, let's see, it might be like a race condition, and it might hit the same port. So what am I changing? I'm saying this port is,
Part number.
that's it.
Just working port out.
I don't even have to change on the top, I just use the same port.
But how would we know? How would we know? They were doing the same thing.
You can say same 2. It's not returning the same. Server 2 was created
There we go.
using a different request. Right? It's already being in use. That's the error you will get. But if you have two different port numbers, that's perfectly fine, and that will run. If we change this to port 2.
You have to move the port, A and port A.
Yes, you can totally do that. Yeah. If you have two different ports, two different servers are running, then go ahead and in your browser hit two different port numbers and you'll get different responses. Okay? All right. Any other questions?
And then how you distinguish between HTTP and HTTPS.
That's kind of a bit different. Yeah. HTTPS is still a protocol that's more secure versus HTTP. That's the difference between those two. It uses a different port? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Or it uses a different one, a more secured one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead. All right. Let's take a break and we'll start back at 8:10 and you guys will be creating your own server. This is you will create two servers in the same file and then run the same code that I was showing you. Okay. Nick will slack out the exercise and we'll start back at 8:10.
You have to make two handle device functions. You have to be servers.
Well, how do you know? What you're trying to differentiate is my one server is doing something else and the other one is doing something else. How do you differentiate?
I'm taking my server.
You can have both return using the same handle request, but you wouldn't know what happened. Yeah, which one is? That's a difference. Most of the time,
I've seen that so much, like handle requests, like I've seen that in code, and that must be something people do. Like,
yeah, it's kind of more. These names are very standard. I mean, what else would you call it? Handle my request or something like that. We are not innovative with names. So somebody use handle request now. Everybody calls it handle request. It's kind of easy to remember.
it's cool. It's like, yeah, I mean, this is opening up a whole other side of things I never even thought about.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Well, I mean, cause yeah, like it's the whole process. Like I've dealt with it and dealt with developers who are, hey, you know, I'm trying to link up this API to my data fields. Here's the data fields I have matching and stuff. And so I got the concept of, okay, you know, I type in data and send it over here, and
Right.
then this matches that. But this just like I kind of visualize it a little different, especially with the knowledge that we know now. It's just yeah, I'm not great, but I'm getting there. Yeah. I don't know, it's feel smart. You're like, I know I'm not stupid. Because it's smart.
It's like sticking in. Why do you call that function?
I think, okay. So, it's good.
Take the sound panel off. Take the sound panel off.
Of course not.
Huh? So what time? 8:10. 8:10 minutes.
Yes. So, open port two. Port two. Oh, no, there's just port. The second one. I have port two. So is it correct, Daniel? On the second server, is
Yes.
it just plus port, right? Or port two? On the bottom, on the very bottom, line 27.
Yeah, it's going to be on port 2.
Port two. So line 27? Okay, port two.
Second port.
So then they're all down there.
Yeah, I was showing that error.
Yes, okay.
You will get an error if you have the same port.
Oh,
That's what I was showing.
Okay.
You got the error?
Well, I had to use the,
Oh.
it didn't have the capital, and that was my error. That's my, yeah, because I had up in port two.
Hmm. So if you have the server listing on the same port twice, it's going to be an error.
I kept it on the different ports.
Yeah.
I just had Right, you get your capital, the one. Yeah, but I have something wrong with.
And how do you test when you run your server? Then did you go to browser and make sure? Right. How do you? Yeah. So this code you have to run on your browser also. And we want to make sure that our server is responding with the correct information. So if you type in localhost port number 1, whatever you have, it should return you this data. If you type in localhost port number 2nd port, it should return you something different. So that's how you differentiate. Okay. And make sure you start your server and then test it on your browser because that's where your pages are going to come. It worked? Two different? Excellent.
Oh, really, it's. Look at that, it doesn't do anything. It's just dead. No, it just stopped going. It just.
I like this classroom. Yeah.
It's like, I like the last one.
Oh, on the yellow color?
I like that.
Oh, we also have yellow one in our classroom, but it's hidden by those two little keys.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yellow, but it's kind of hidden. So
In our classroom, there's yellow?
yeah, on the left.
You're right, yeah.
Oh, and it's
Isn't it
Oh,
red?
Isn't it red? Yeah, I thought that was red.
Yeah, it's red.
red.
Yep, some sort of like.
classroom too, on not on whiteboard, like you've done to the other two classrooms?
What? Because they're all whiteboards. Or that's a yellow board, but
It's a yellow board.
it's fine.
What?
They're all dry white.
Weird to say.
Yeah, board.
Well, it's address.
Yeah.
It's just like where you live is, you know it's your house, but if you tell them the post office, how to get there.
Right.
You have
yeah.
a specific address, well, that's what
Yeah.
those numbers are.
Okay,
But humans
yeah.
don't think that way, like nobody's gonna
Right,
come to
yeah.
their website and they have to remember a crazy number. So they have
Yeah,
these
yeah.
servers that turn, you know, myfancywebsite.com.
Yeah. Come to my site, 017. Where the card is at.
Right. Exactly. So that 127.0.0.1, it's like a reserved address.
Yeah.
That means point back to your own computer.
Okay.
So localhost actually turns into that number.
So they were saying like there's no place like home, like
Yeah.
there's no place
Yeah,
said
so
it's
I've
so
seen
like
bumper
bumper
stickers that
stickers.
say that place on 127.0.0.1. I'm like, man, you are making a very small subset of the population laugh really hard.
Yeah,
Are you sure it didn't say bully?
yeah. At first, well, it may have actually been that same week, so I might have heard it say the wrong way. It might have been like the 5 days I was in my head just saying it.
That's it. Now I'm gonna have to get a license plate that says Ninja Valley.
Because
Ridiculous. Too bad I can't handle case license plate.
for
So you're scared. Yeah. Your house is fun.
I don't know. So, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. I didn't scroll. So,
because he was reading into it, and he goes over the
Yeah.
drivers and stuff. So he was like
I had
legitimately reading that.
Which does the,
You talking about that?
I-
Okay,
what
boom
is
is a different type of. That's
What are your
high end.
Is it the same one?
No. It's trolling. No, I don't believe bullying. I don't believe he's- I honestly believe that he's trolled us before because he'll comment like side comment under his breath. Well, the correct pronunciation, but he said bullying is like say that over and over. I've never heard
I
of
have
him
to
just
get mad.
like
Yeah, okay,
trolling.
it doesn't matter.
No,
So it
I
doesn't matter.
that's full of troll. I know, I've seen it. I don't.
You can totally troll a
troll.
troll.
That's not the best troll. Yeah. I don't know, dude. Especially since we're all noobs. I don't know, man. It's prime trolling territory. It'd be like the last week, it'd be like, oh, by the way, the field is ready to harvest. I'm trolling y'all. That actually makes it better. If that's what's happening. I honestly, I'm fine with that. That's actually hilarious. That's.
Am I good here? The funny thing is that when we and Jill when we did that assignment, when we were looking at this, when we started talking, we read it like
Oh, yeah.
read it, and I was
Probably.
the interbound.
Yeah,
We were reading it like in Spanish, and then all of a sudden he said it like.
We're like, ah.
So like, wait, Rob, I'm like, wait, were we right? I was like, wait, no, we're not.
Troll. Deliberately trolling. Because what does it matter? It doesn't call. So that's why it's an innocuous troll. It's an innocuous troll. I'm sorry. But it doesn't matter. You know what it is. You know what it is. You know what it does.
Really?
It goes by another name. So.
Everything's the same and
I need the mic. But they still have the shower.
Yeah. I am.
And it's a patch this.
Hang on.
What's up?
So, I was asking about the defaults. Is like, if you type in localhost and no, I just put http://localhost. If I have it set up on port 80 or a couple of defaults, it just works, right? But if it's some other random number I chose, I have to specify
You
at
have
that
to
point.
specify. Yes.
But if I don't specify it, it will look for the default for
Default.
that
Yes.
protocol.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. So yeah, usually you can do it by
That is what I meant, but
Yeah.
that's
and
not
then they
your
get all
answer.
frustrated. But also, it's
That's
mostly
the
just about like
answer to your
using the
problem.
other person.
No, it is not.
Say or use it.
It is not. I mean, I think.
Get into that.
Oh, I was wondering.
Bullying. No, we're switching back to bullying. No, it's bowling. I remember bowling theory. I don't buy it.
Yeah, bowling.
I
We've been saying bowling.
So, well, that was.
No, I don't know who's on third. Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third.
Third is restricted. Third is restricted. Third floor is restricted. You can't even go there. I don't think there's a fourth. Unless it's like some super seniors. I thought there was a there's a fourth.
What's his name?
Yeah.
Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third.
You tried? I hope your picture didn't come on the camera. They're going to be like, hey, one of your students is poking around.
I was lost.
And then I'll have to come and be like,
I was lost.
oh, you were lost after 3 months?
Yeah, this is a whole nother
Oh,
software.
yeah. Okay. That's
I
it.
was
That's
lost.
it.
We keep moving classrooms. I don't know.
Oh,
where
that's
I'm
good.
going.
Yes.
The first one ran.
Alright, okay. Alright, so they slacked out the exercise. Please go ahead and give it a try. Basically, but I just want to make sure everybody is able to at least run one of the servers. Okay? We'll take 5 minutes and then we'll start the more interesting part.
The first one ran, when I added the second one, it just didn't.
We already have the extra.
Make a service.
They never sort of say more than make the second one today.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Read that.
So you missed.
I know there's some other more proper method.
Already?
Hard canceling
So
out.
that's
But that was the first one. I changed it.
Well, that's the way.
But see, I have two on. I had first, that was the first one.
Are you listening on the second one?
That's the way,
It doesn't matter if you
Yes.
this or
Oh, you
There's only a listening part.
But not from the terminal, right?
Well, no, if you just want to kill it, you can in code, you can do process.exit or
No, that's it. Good one.
It's pretty cool that after I stopped making it crash.
Stop.
So here, so I'll do.
What one? What one?
Oh, what's new?
I know, it's literally the same thing. I don't have to move.
No. That's it.
Okay, that's okay. Okay. Yeah, host like toast. That's okay. Ooh. What is this like this? Well, that's something.
No, you have to write code. Whatever. Just you were able to run the first
Yes.
one. Oh, see? So it's already. So you have a running instance. So you already had a. You already had a running somewhere else.
Right, but not the second. Oh, so.
So it's erroring out saying 8080 as usually. So if you get that error and your code is right, then this means some instance like orphaned out and it's already running. So somehow you need to find it out and kill it. Otherwise it won't. Yeah, that's what I like to call it. Because well, that's how we did it. Otherwise, there are some commands. I don't remember, but what I usually do is I go and say how to kill port 8080, and then it will kill anything that is listed on port 8080.
So why am I so special?
No, because you already had something running. I had to stop it. Go back.
But we all did it, right? We all did it. So the second one.
Because you stopped it, but she never stopped it. Her
How did she stop it?
you press Control C or something.
Did you? Lucky.
So how did you?
We're in. Look, I got both of them. But I don't.
Right, now if you try to run the
So,
same thing, same
mine is
code
running.
in a different terminal, it's going to be an error.
Or is it running here?
And she had it running somewhere.
So she had that PowerShell, and I just didn't know.
But yeah, it doesn't matter. So you
So
go to
okay.
PowerShell and then try to run it again.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah. So basically what I mean is if you open a new terminal, go to your command prompt and run the same code, it's going to give you an error.
So
Because
control
it's all-
C, because I was in.
It's control C.
That's
Yeah.
what he said he did, so, okay.
Yeah, control C to stop the server.
Okay, good to know. Thank
So,
you.
So it's running. Now if you want to change, you will have to do control C and
I'm
kill
running
that.
now.
Otherwise you'll get an error.
Yay, perfect. Yep, that's cool. Okay. Yeah, I must.
Keep this here so I can actually see.
You got it?
Localhost 8080 because I'm not running this. Let's make sure. Terminal.
Oh,
Okay. All right, everybody good? Still working on it? You good? Who said no? Oh. I can give a couple of more minutes. You got it? Yeah, yeah, ask. Uh-huh.
And then I'll run that. So we can use control to host and then you just do the ADD.
so actually now. Basically, I just.
See, mine's running it now. So this one? This one? Yeah.
So you copy it, but you didn't copy
Yeah.
it. Should be the All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's go ahead and look at few other things. Again, refer to that PowerPoint. This thing we did the listen part. What was another one? We saw URL parsing and then send HTML. Right. Right now it's not very. I mean, it does send me the string back, right? But what I want is my server should be returning my HTML pages also, right? That's the purpose. That's one of the purpose of the server. That my HTML is over here. When I call this URL, and my URL is localhost/8080, it should send me some HTML. So let's go ahead and add some HTML so that we can see our HTML on our page instead of this string. So again, the function is still the same, dot end, and in this I need to pass in my HTML now. Okay, so let's do it the difficult way first. So I'm going to create my HTML. I'm going to create a variable, and then I'm going to write my HTML out. So we have gone back thousands of years. Now we are writing our HTML in our string. All right. So what do I do? Body. Right. You guys remember the tags, right? What? What is this? I don't know what this is. What are you typing? Body? Tag? What? Please don't do this to me.
Why are you doing stuff?
Let's go ahead. Yeah. That's good to hear. Versus saying, well, what is that? What?
I do. I feel like that now. I'm taking time. Sweat.
Home page. Okay. So I have this HTML and I can send this back. What's going to happen is if everything is good, it should render and it should show me a HTML page now, right? If this HTML is correct, I hope the syntax looks good. So let me go ahead and stop my server and I'm going to rerun this. And this time if I go to my browser, refresh, it's my home page. You guys see it? So what my server just did, it is now sending me my HTML. Okay, super simple. Right now it's simple, still a string, same method, but this time it's an HTML and my browser is able to recognize and render that HTML. And that is what is happening when you are creating your websites and all that stuff, somebody has this code written and you are sending that code back. Okay, we started with a string. You can add every HTML tag over here, image or anything, href, everything is going to work. Okay, everybody good? Understand this is how we do HTML? Again, but this is not the ideal way, right? I can't write my HTML completely over here. Right?
You put the file
We put it in a different file, yes. So before we do that, let's go ahead and do something else. So right now, remember when I was outputting, I had a request.url, and what was it outputting? When I had a string and I was saying request.url, it was just forward slash. So forward slash means your home page. Like this is the page. If you don't have anything after that, that's what shows up. So basically we say our home page. Like if you go to any website, you say www.something.com and a page shows up. And then you click contacts or products or something, then you see the URL kind of changes to products, right? And then slash contacts. We've done this in your portfolio also, right? Portfolio, whatever those pages are. These are individual pages, right? So in this part, let's go ahead and look at the URL parsing. What it means is that my server should recognize these things and then should output something, all right? So when I type in, if I don't type in anything, by default, what comes to my server is just forward slash, and then it sends me my HTML, all right? So let's go ahead and change this a bit. Make this, what is it? No, there's nothing. It's the same thing. Everything I'm doing in my handle request now. This part is done. I created my server. It's listening. I don't have to do anything else. Everything now I have to do is, how do I handle my request? When my request comes in, what do I do with that request? Okay, so let's go ahead and do one thing. So my request would be, let me create a variable called path and then request.url. Again, what does it give me? It gives me this, or this, whatever pages I have. Okay, so we'll have if statements, or let's go ahead with a switch. We are better now, right? So we can use our, let me go ahead and close this since I need to restart this anyway. Okay, so I'm going to write a switch on my path. Then I'm going to say if my path is slash, right, my home page, then let's go ahead and set this thing. Let's make this global. Okay. If my path is slash, like by default one, return this HTML. Okay. Similarly, we are talking about URL parsing. Let's go ahead and add some more pages. Let's say if the user types in my website, which is localhost / contact, okay, then I want my HTML to look something similar. Okay. And then let's go ahead and change this to contact page. Okay. And default, if somebody types in a URL other than these two, I'm going to say not found, or 404. Remember the 404 pages? That's what they're doing. So I'm going to say 404 page not found. Oops. Okay, same thing, same concept. I started with the string. Now I'm going into my HTML. Now I'm going into my URL parsing and routing. This is called routing. Why is it called routing? So you see, it's my handle request checks what the URL is and routes it accordingly. Okay. So let's go ahead and run this and see. What our outputs are. Node, server. Okay, everything looks good. So if I go back here, I refresh, still shows my home page. Now if I type in /contacts, okay, or was it contact? Contact, okay, it takes me to my contact page. You see that? If I type in any other page that doesn't exist, for example, portfolio, let's go with this one. Does it exist? I have not created this page on my server and it does not exist. What should happen? It should say 404 not found. Why? Because in my condition I'm saying if you come across a path that is not this or this, go ahead and send this HTML back.
That's the same by default if it's not any of these.
Right. That's how the switch statement works, right? It's the else. Or you can write this whole thing out as if else, but we are not newbies anyway, so that's why we're using switch. Okay? Yes, Matt.
So are the 404 page not found you see in the wild done like this, or is that also the default built into the servers?
Usually it's the built-in, it's the default one. I mean, this is how they're writing it. Because if you use a switch, this is the easiest one. If anybody types in anything other than those, then it's easy to just say 404.
Like, do they write that every time, or is like internet information servers do that? They can't find it?
Usually, yeah. Those if you are hosting and it doesn't find it, yes, that's their page. But this is if you see like a nice dinosaur picture or something that website have, they are kind of taking that control over. They're saying, hey, don't IIS or internet server, don't worry about it. I will handle it. Yeah, that's what they do. Okay. Let me close this out and see if you guys have any questions. All right. So what we started with, listen. We did URL parsing. We did the send HTML. We're kind of trending towards routing, and we'll see some more code. Everybody understand what's going on? Okay. Let's look at the. Okay. Now, okay, this is a super simple page. Is that how my page is going to be? It's not going to be like that. I'll have a complicated HTML, and I can type in my strings like this whole day, right? So what's the solution? Yeah, you just create a HTML index.html or your HTML files on the same folder, and then link them. Instead of saying response.end this string, pass in that file. Simple. All right, let's take a look. How would we do that? Let me go ahead and keep this. Just copy this, bring it over here, and close this. Okay. The path is good, but this is not what I want. So let's go ahead and remove this. I don't want this. Okay. So now what we do is create our index.html. That's our home page. Okay. Go ahead and write your HTMLs here. The same thing, you can use Bootstrap. Let's go ahead and search Bootstrap and maybe just use like a simple Jumbotron or something. Okay, this looks good. On my body, let's see, Jumbotron. Let's go ahead and paste some code for the Jumbotron. Let's do this too. Okay. Let's go ahead and create a list. Okay, let's take this code. Okay, so go ahead and create a list, simple list. Then you just paste this HTML here and change this up. Okay, so you guys go ahead and create your own list. Oh, I didn't start. Let's see. Okay, so I created a simple web page, used our favorite Bootstrap, and created this page. Okay, again, it's not linked or anything, it's just creation. All right, now what I have to do is I have to link this page in my server.js. So whenever somebody comes to my page the first time, they get this index.html. Now, if I want to read a file, everybody remember the FS? Excellent. So let's go ahead and use our FS module to read that file. So what I'm doing is I'm reading that file, taking the content out, and then sending it in my end method. That's all I'm doing. Okay, so let fs is equal to, let's go ahead and import our module fs. Okay, this module. All right, let me look up the, is it read file, right? Yeah, so let's do it here. We'll move it somewhere else. So it's fs dot read file. Okay, takes into the first is your file path, and then we have a callback function, right? Which is error and data that is read from the file. Okay, and my path is going to be underscore the name plus / index.html. Okay, everybody remember the dir name thing? Kind of gives you the path your file is in. Like whatever this code is running in, like whatever the path of that code is, dir name will replace. It's a keyword that comes in your Node.js. What it does is it gives you the current directory. Current directory of what? Of this file, wherever this is running. And why do I put this? When I deploy to my server, the path is going to change, right? But this variable is always going to give me the path of this server.js. So that's why I always use dir name, and then add your index.html. So what it is going to do, it's going to look up where this, what is the directory of this is. This is slash day1 slash whatever it's called, and then it will add index.html to it. Okay? And in this, we will go ahead and.
I have to say that's the first time I've ever seen that.
Oh, you haven't seen the dir name? You guys didn't use it in your homework? Okay.
Posting those are names.
Okay. All right. So let me go ahead. Let me tell you one more time. So dir name. It's hold on. It's two underscores underscore dir name, and it gives you the directory, the path for your current file, wherever you call this code. So for this one, it's going to, if you do a console log and see, it's going to give you slash day1 slash my example 0 and my examples slash better HTML server, and then that's where it will stop because it's a directory, right? It doesn't give you the file path, it gives you where the directory is for this file. And when I get to this, my index.html is inside this directory. So I just add slash index.html. Okay, this is a keyword that comes built in with Node.js. All right? Yes.
This little thing has notice that you didn't install an HTTP package, right?
Good question. Why did I not install?
I don't know.
No, you should know. What does it tell you? Huh?
It's already installed on the computer.
Why did you install FS?
I mean, no,
Why did
no,
you
no,
not install FS?
Not FS.
No, I get it.
Oh, yes.
Why did you not install FS?
No, but we do have to install it, right? I need to, no? Do the npm install FS? We don't
No,
have
that's
to do
like
that this
reading,
time?
that's like selecting the file.
So
It's
FS
just
is FS is built in into Node.
Yeah.
That kind of question backfired on me. I was like, you're going to say FS is built in, and I'm going to say, yeah.
That's a node.
Right. So FS is a module that is built in into Node, and HTTP is also built in into Node.
I just put,
Oh,
like,
that's
am I-
built in.
didn't we install it before?
No, not the FS.
Not FS.
No?
FS is
No,
built in.
install-
HTTP is also built in.
Well, I installed.
Hold on, hold on, give me it.
I installed it though.
You installed FS? I don't know what
No,
you
not
installed.
FS.
What did you install?
Because I was sitting there and I was like, oh, it's required.
So
it installed something.
yeah, it installed something.
I don't know.
But all right, one more time. So HTTP. Remember, I was talking about Express. What Express does is it does the same thing in a better way. It has more easier code. But the built-in module for Node.js is HTTP because Node.js was kind of created for the same reason that it should be running on your server. So when they came out with Node.js, they have this built-in. So if you use your HTTP, this is built-in into Node.js. You don't have to do npm package. It comes installed with it.
Okay.
Same as FS. When you look at Express on Saturday, it's not built-in. It's a third party. Somebody else went ahead and they said we can do this better, and that's where Express came in. Okay. For now, HTTP. This is how you do it, and it's a built-in module. And if I don't do an install, you guys should recognize that this should be built. Otherwise, it wouldn't even run. It's going to give me an error, right?
Yeah.
If I don't install it. Okay. All right. I'm glad you clarified. I didn't realize that. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and complete this. Now I have my index.html file, and then let's go ahead and move this code in our path. Okay, let's move it over here. If somebody just goes here, I want to go ahead and read this file. And then I want, let's go ahead and move this inside over here. And why do I need to do? Because it's a async method. If I do it outside, this is going to get executed first. So let's go ahead and send the data back. What is data going to have? It's going to have the code for this index.html. Okay, so read file again goes, finds this file, reads the contents, puts it into the data variable, and I'm just saying, hey, go ahead and send the data back. Okay. This would be similar, but we'll come to it. Right now our case will work because I'm just going to go to this one. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. Put in terminal. Okay. Now if I go to my page and I go to my home page, and there is my web page. See it? That's how I do it. Now you guys understand how the web pages are working? You are doing everything and you are sending that information from your server. This whole thing is being run from your server. Okay, you created an empty box and then you went ahead and wrote some code, and when somebody comes to this side, you are basically saying, hey, send this information. Now, if you want a contact, what are you going to do? You're going to write a new web page, and then you're going to put this over here, and then the same step. Okay, and this is what I was saying. This is where it gets confusing. .html is my front end. Server.js is in my Node.js. Now, well, not today, but now think about it. You won't have index.js. You will have some JavaScript files that run on your front end, right? Where are you going to put those files? In the same folder. That's where the confusion starts, and people are confusing the Node.js code and the JavaScript code. All right, and then the project, they're like, oh, it's not working. And when I look over that you're trying to use Axios and do an npm install on the JavaScript file with jQuery, kind of looks weird, but I'm like, yeah, no. Okay. Right now it's easy to recognize because I just have like 2 files. But when you have like 5 or 6 pages and server.js, you break server.js into multiple Y because module.exports. We don't want all the code over here, so we'll have more code. Better would be like to create 2 folders within this one, label it public, and we'll see some of the other steps. Yes.
Do you have to step out the like contact page, portfolio page, like you have index, so you have 3 HTML pages there? Or could you do the DOM method and create one empty div on your index and have stuff on other JavaScript pile into that?
Yeah, you can totally do that, but still you will have those separate, right? You will have a JavaScript file to do that page, yeah. But usually, what you do is you stub out the basic one. You don't want to write this context.html in your JavaScript. Why not? Because it's easy. If you have a .html file, you see how easy it is to write and find errors. If you do it in JavaScript, you have to manually type in the whole string saying, hey, h1 and this, kind of more difficult. So I would create a stub out of my contacts, but if there are stuff that is changing, that's where we use jQuery, right? You're going to create a jQuery file, JS file, and then kind of stub them out. It's the same thing that you guys have done in the project 1. The only addition is your server.js, which is serving this file.
Sure.
So the standards that you have learned, keep with those ones. Don't like change because there's a server.js.
So what page would you be referencing on your server.js? If you go back to your server.js?
Which page? If my contacts?
Yeah.
For this one, I'm going to create a new contact and do the exact same thing over here.
Except with instead of index.html.
Right. I'm going to say context.html.
Because you have a separate.
I'll have a separate context.html right over here. Okay, so as many pages are, so what is this saying again? It is saying if you come to my home page, give index.html. If somebody types in /contact and go to my contact page, or mostly what you will have within your index.html, you will have a href that has contact.html. Okay, what href would be saying, if you type that in and then say, go back here.
Because on the contact, I guess you could still have empty div that you're referencing like a JavaScript.
Yeah. So suppose you have a link over here, and then you say something href / contact, and then you have a contact over here, right? So what will happen when you click this? Your URL will change to localhost / contact, right? And your server is listening, and it knows what to do with /contact, and then it will render your contact page.
Which is in turn
referencing to a contact page over here. right? Does it answer?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay, so this is what you will have. So instead of typing the whole thing, you will say /contact. Now on your web page, on your client, /contact doesn't mean anything. But your server knows if I get /contact, this is what I need to do. Okay? All right, any other questions? Okay, so they'll track out the next exercise. Go ahead. And so this time you'll have multiple pages and kind of do the same thing that John was asking. Create multiple pages and then link them and create a. This is going to be exercise number 5. So you are creating a couple of 3 pages: home, favorite foods, favorite movies. Okay, go ahead and create those and then kind of follow the same pattern. So you're going to have like 4 web pages, all right, 4 HTML files, and then you're going to have a server.js, and then you're going to be referring these among your other pages. Okay, so the exercise has been slacked out. Let's go back and see. Nope. So this is what you guys are working on. Close my server here. Okay, same concept that I showed you. You are now creating 4 web pages, 4 HTML files, and linking all of them together. In your exercises, you will see one more method just before you do the end one. You will see something like right head. Okay. Before the exercise, you will see before you do call the response.end, you will see response.right head. What it means is every request has a header. You guys get it? If you look at your Chrome inspector, it has header information. It has a lot of information. So in this case, what you are saying is you're going to pass in a code called 200. 200 is a HTTP defined code. If you look it up, 200 means success. Yes, this means that your server has processed the request successfully. So what am I saying? I'm saying that send a header back with 200 and tell my browser that the content that I'm sending back is HTML. So again, if you look in your request on your in your browser, in your Chrome inspector, you probably have seen these tags in some other request that you have made. So this is what is happening. Since we control the server part, right, we need to tell our browser, we need to send some codes telling 404 stands for not found, 200 is success. Then there are a lot more codes if you're interested. But what am I saying over here is that when I was processing this request, I was able to successfully process it. So 200, and the content type, the content that I'm sending you back to the client is an HTML. This kind of prepares the browser to understand what's going on. Okay, by default, it kind of is expecting HTML. We'll come to the JSON part, but you will see this line. So I thought I'll mention it over here. Okay, again, this is just an object. This is the key, and this is the value. So if I come over here, small statement, small statement.
Which number is this exercise?
5. Yes.
So we would have to use 4 different schools.
No, your server is only one.
But the okay, no, that's
Yeah,
4
your
different pages, but it's the same server.
it's the same server. Yeah. It's always going to be one server.
Like,
That was just an example to show you can run multiple servers, but usually you will always have one server running. So once you have this code, for the most part, you're not going to change any of this. This is all your changes are going in your handle request method. So I have only one server running. Then if I have multiple pages, then I'm creating a switch statement and then calling pages based on my URL. So you will have 4 HTML pages, and then you're going to route them accordingly using that switch statement. So if I type in localhost/home, this will be one page. If I type in /favorite foods, don't add a space. Come up with a better name. If I come over here, then it should take me to your favorite foods page. If I type in localhost 8080/favorite movies, the third page, favorite CSS frameworks, then a fourth page. Okay. And the code is same. You're just adding more. Adding more. Completing the case statements.
So, Daniel, how would
Yes.
we create a link to, like, from one of our HTML pages to another?
Just like this, line number 20. So you will mention on your
Okay,
HTML.
just like that.
Yeah, like that, and then come back, home page. So your HTML doesn't know what this is, but your server will recognize it. It will take care of it. All right, how's everybody doing? Good? Excellent. At least one page or two? Good? You got all four? Oh, nice. Right. And again, you don't have to use Bootstrap or anything complicated. Simple href. I was just showing you that you can even use Bootstrap, but if it's super complicated, just want to do a quick, just have a href homepage, go back to that page, and then come back. That's what we are testing. And you're just replicating these lines in each case statement.
Inside your HTML, are you supposed to make a reference to the JavaScript?
JavaScript? What JavaScript?
I mean, JSON. I mean,
JSON?
Server.js.
Server.js? No.
So you're referencing from server.js to HTML with the slash index.
Yes, again, that's what I was saying. The confusion is your server.js has nothing to do with your index.html. On the coding side, index.html doesn't even know that there's a server.js. Your server.js has all the information. Your index.html doesn't know what's going on. Okay? So if I look at my index.html, there is no reference for server.js. Why? Again, server.js is the Node.js part. It has nothing to do with the HTML. Your JavaScript, that has to do with HTML when it gets complicated, but index or any HTML file has no information about Node.js. You refer, it's going to give you an error. It doesn't know how to parse Node.js code. You can refer other HTML pages like this, And this information, does your HTML know? It doesn't know anything about this. It will send this information to your server. Okay? Why? Because again, your server.js is the one that is running. When you do the listen, when you run this, your server has all the information. So when you make your HTML request, it comes to your server with that slash something, and then your server routes and processes all that information. Remember what I was saying? Your front end code and your back end code all reside on your on the same box. That's what it is. Your index.html is also here. Your server code is also here. The server knows about the index.html, but index.html doesn't know anything about your server.js.
Right. I'm still trying to get my sentence out.
For index.html, this is just a page. There's no reference. There's nothing.
Well, what's the href?
Href is a link.
Right, so why would?
So in your exercise, you need to link your pages, right? You have those 4 pages. And then if I go to favorite foods, if I want to come back to home, how would you come back? You need to have a link over there. And you click that link, and then your link will have the page, like slash and your web page. But you see it's not a www or it's nothing like that. Okay? And that tells me that your index.html and your code for server are kind of in the same location, and they know how to talk to each other. Your server.js knows. Done? How far? Were you going to create the first page?
Getting this.
Getting what?
Just go that route to me.
Go what route?
I get the concept.
Okay, that's good. Again, I said it's more important to get the concept. The coding, yes, you need to get it, go back and try, but if you get the concept, and that's what I'm afraid of, that people getting confused that and thinking that these two are somehow, you need to reference your server.js and your index.html. That's what I'm kind of worried about. Exactly. Okay. And the coding part, yes, this might be a little bit more code, but as long as you understand what's going on. When you get to Express, they have made it a little bit more easier, but you still need to know how to code it and understand what's going on over here, how the linkage is working.
So why do we do the contact though for this one? Or is this?
Oh, I didn't get a chance to create. This was from the previous example,
okay,
and then
that's
I
what I was
coded over here. Yeah, you can, and then that's what you are doing in your favorites. You have
Right,
a
we're doing the
homepage,
favorites.
then you have a favorite, and you have
Right, okay, that's what I'm.
Okay. All right. Any questions? Questions? Because there's one more request that I need to show you. All right. Good.
No, but.
What's the question? No, go ahead.
No, I mean, I thought I wrote it out correctly.
Okay, that's the syntax. We can come to it, but do you understand the concept? Do you know what is going on?
Yeah.
All right. So okay. So in this box, now let's look at it. In this box, it was an empty box. We did the listen, we did the create part, we did the URL parsing, we did the routing, and we did the HTML. All right. Everybody good on that? We covered those. Now, when you're making these requests, what kind of HTTP request is this? When I show those pages and all.
Not a secure one.
No, that's not. So there are, so HTTP, there are methods in HTTP. Basically like 4 or 5. What's this one?
The get.
This is the get. Does everybody understand that when you do HTTP and you type in a website, you are basically making a get request. Okay? Now we are going to see post. Okay, how do you make a post request? Okay, now here's what it is. Get request, you can type in the URL in the browser and the page shows up. Get recognizes, or this is how you do the get request. Post, you cannot do it in your browser, like you cannot type in over here because the default is always get. You cannot change the browser behavior. So you cannot use the browser, like type in some URL, expect the post is going to work. That's not how it's going to work. Okay? So we'll have to find a different mechanism to do that, and we'll show you. and then we'll go from there. Okay? So let's go ahead. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and create a post request, the processing part. So go ahead and say post request. Okay. This was the simple one, right? Nope. Completed. Okay. I have to modify this one. Alright, so I'm going to copy this code and then just write a simple one. So I'm going to basically remove all that stuff and come back to our kind of original thing. Okay, so creation and handle request, my server is listening on this port. Okay, now when I do a post, it still comes in my request. Let's remove this. Again, this is a little bit different in Express, but when you are not using Express, you are doing this in Node.js code. There is, and you will recognize this method and request.on. Okay, let me type this out and then see if anybody recognizes something similar that we have done in the past. Let me recognize. What is it? It's the event, and where did we see the on event? Not the request, it's the on. From the database side. Firebase. Exactly, that's what it is. Excellent. Right, remember we saw some other functions in Firebase.on. It's kind of similar concept. So request.on means, and this word data, this is the event that your server is listening on when the data is coming. So for post, what does post mean? Post means that you're sending some data to your server. Okay, get is you're asking the server to return some data, but in your post, you are sending some data to your server, and your server should be able to process the data. Okay, you are sending it. You are saying, hey, here's the data, kind of do whatever you want for this. So there are two events. One is called on, and the second one is end. Okay, similar to Firebase, we saw they had like end and on when the values were changing. So it's the similar concept over here. Oops, let me remove it. So what data this is when your data is coming in. Okay, the first one is when your data is coming in, it's not finished. All right, and why it is important? You know, when a request comes in, when you send data over the network, right? It's broken down into bytes and bits, and all of that kind of start coming in, right? We saw VCA strings and all that stuff, but actually behind the scenes, you are receiving bits. Your server is receiving packets and all that stuff, right? So this function is saying, this listener is this event will be keep firing as your data comes in. Okay. So what I'm saying is that as my data comes in, let me create a variable here. Let request data, and it's going to be a string. I'm going to say request data plus equal to data, this variable over here, this thing. Okay, so what am I saying is as the data is coming in, kind of combine all that data. Again, why am I doing this? Because on the server side, when you send a request, it's kind of broken down into chunks, it comes in packets and all that stuff. So your data is not like one single thing, kind of keeps coming in. So you need to make sure that your server receives all the data if it is breaking down. Okay, and this end function, if you had to take a guess, it means that all my data has been received. Once the data is received, behind the scene Node.js kind of keeps track of that. When it knows that the connection is broken, the client has sent all the data, it's going to fire this event. Okay, at this point, I have all the data that is required. So we can go ahead and console log our request data and see what came through. Okay, request data. Okay, and then I'm going to say request, not payment request, response dot end. I'm going to keep it empty. I don't want to send anything back. It's a post request. I'm not really sending anything back. I'm just receiving all the data. Okay. Again, it there are two events. One is called data and one is end. Okay, data and end. Data is will keep firing as your data is coming in, and in that event, what you want to do is you want to make sure you collect everything. Okay, end will be fired once Node.js or your server kind of determines behind the scenes that all data has been completed. This event will then fire. Okay, this will have the complete data that was transferred from your client. Okay, so we go ahead and console log this, and it should show up on our terminal. Okay, before we run this code, any questions? This is how you do the post request. This is how you process a post request. All right. Now, how do we run this? We cannot run this in browser. So let me first go ahead and run this code to make sure this is running. You guys must have used in your API. Can somebody take a guess? If I want to do a post request, what can I use? Postman. Anybody used it? Just a little bit. Okay, so Postman is a really, if you haven't, please download that. Postman is a really great tool to see your requests. Again, you cannot run this in your browser because this is a post request. The browser only does your GET request. So if you download and look at it, this is how it looks like. Again, Postman is not the only product. There are a few more. You can search by something like HTTP API request tools or something like that. But Postman is one of the more popular ones, and that's what we'll use. So what Postman does is it allows you to make your get, post, put all of these requests and see what's going on. Okay, so since we are going to make a post request, and then what am I going to type in my URL? Localhost. So http dot slash colon slash localhost. Am I typing this right? And then 8080. Okay. This is the request I'm going to make. Okay. Now when I make this request, if this is successful, I should see something over here. Now this post request is not complete. Now if I want to send any data in a post request, always when you make a post request, remember from your AJAX call, all that data goes in the body. Okay, so you see this body tab over here. If you are making a post request, you need to put your data inside your body tab. That's where you would normally put any data that you want to send through a post request. Okay, again, get request, you just have a URL, you make a get request and you get the data back. And that's what we did in our AJAX calls. When you were making those AJAX calls, we were getting data back. You just type in the URL and it returns you a JSON, right? For a post request, you are sending the data and you need to send the data in what we call HTTP body, all right? So each of your requests has a body and a URL and all that stuff. For a post, just remember that you need to send the data in body, all right? The easy part over here is go to Postman, select the body tab, and then you can put in whatever you want to send. So you will say hello world. Okay. So this is data that I'm sending, and if everything is good, our server should receive this hello world. Yes, yes. Download Postman. Just for this, we'll do the next exercise. If you see you don't actually need Postman over there, I'll go through that in a bit. But everybody understand, this is how you do a post request, and this is how you test it out. Okay? Just keep in your mind when we get to APIs, we'll be creating these post and get and all of that stuff. We'll be testing in Postman. Yes?
Where was the reply?
It should be in the server, right? My server is now receiving the data from the client, and it should show up because I did the console log. Yes.
So the plus equals, I looked it up, so it's assignment by addition.
Oh,
So I'm familiar what that was, so you
No?
send that to me, that.
no, it just means equal to request plus data. It's a short form for this thing. Oh.
So I looked it up, it said assignment by addition. and
Yeah, this is your JavaScript and all that stuff. Yeah.
You're adding that.
Yeah. So this if you this is that short form for this exact same thing. So I have these repeating, so you can actually skip this and just do plus equal to. That's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. Any other questions regarding to the post? All right. Remember those these things. All right. So do the next exercise again. Here's the next exercise. You will be creating a form. Now go back if you remember your HTML forms. Remember they used to have a couple of attributes like action and something. Let me go back in. So look up the HTML form on your W3 schools, and you will see the forms used to have an action tag and then had a method. We used to ignore this because we're not there now. And your actions, you type in the URL of your server that you're trying to access, and the method, you will say it's a post request. And this is for your HTML forms. Your HTML forms have a built-in post method. All right, look up HTML form, kind of revise that. And then what you are basically creating is an HTML form with some fields, and you are just passing the data from these fields to your server in this exercise. Okay, the code on the server is same that I just showed you. It's just your HTML that you need to come up with.
Why does the form have that? Like,
Right.
Simple.
It's simple, and that's why HTML is built. Yes, that's how, and they kind of built it into HTML. Because get, I told you, right? It's a URL is easier. Usually get and post are the more popular ones. So in your HTML, they kind of built in this post in your form. Okay, so look up the form and then see if you can come up with solve the next exercise. I think Nick already slacked it out. Okay, it is a little bit difficult exercise. Kind of, you need to refresh your memory about forms. How do you use forms? And then give it a try. It's a definitely good. It will really clarify how to use post. And usually that's how you would be using. You'll have a form from your HTML page, and you'll be making a post request. So take a look at that exercise. Create a web page, index.html simple page, and then add a form inside it. Okay, and this is the hint. Look up the action attribute of the form, and then the method attribute of the form. And in the action, you're going to type in your complete URL that you're trying to post to. So in our case, it would be HTTP localhost, okay, 8080, and then the web page that you create. Let's see what's the README for this one. You can call it anything you want. Let's say, what do I want to call that page? Let's see what the solution has. So they're saying create an HTML. They're calling it thanks. Okay. So what is happening is you're going to create a index.html page, and your page has one form in it. Okay. Your index.html has a page and it has a form, HTML form, and it has a couple of fields. You will type in the data and click the submit button. Okay. Look up the form again. What you would do is you will take this data back, right, and then put in your actions, and then put in the method name, and then just console log the data that comes in just like this. Given up?
Yes.
Yes.
Today, yes.
I told you it's good. It's a this is challenge. So before you come into Saturday, it's going to get even more challenging. I cannot even tell you. Okay,
you
so
have to
please
see
make sure.
The FS, I see what you have to do.
Yeah.
To post it, I see now.
Right. You don't need the FS. Okay. Let me.
Well, because I see the file, I thought you don't have to do.
Daniel?
Yes.
Video on Saturday or not?
I'm not here on Saturday.
No!
We're gonna
be okay,
guys. You guys are going to be fine.
We can't even ask questions.
Guys.
I feel like.
What? Why can't you ask questions?
He's like, slack it out, don't talk to me. I'm trying to
That's
around.
asking though.
No, it is. It never happens.
Really?
He is nice.
Fine, guys. You guys are.
Because he doesn't code it out. He's just like, yeah, here's code.
I mean, yeah, I already have all the answers and solutions for what we're gonna go over this weekend because it's the exact same thing.
He's not gonna change it, which is cool. I'm not slamming it.
Okay. Let me. All right. Give me like few minutes. Let me just go. Please go ahead and try this last exercise. What Nick has slacked out. But let me give you quick rundown. I mean, there's nothing different that we have seen. So the only complicated part, well, it shouldn't be as complicated because we have done this in our HTML. Again, what I was talking about is you are using your HTML form, okay? The form has your inputs, right? This is again the same HTML form or whatever bootstrap form, it doesn't matter. It does have the action, it has the method, and then you're entering. So this form knows what to do as long as you give in the right method and the URL. So it will take all this data and then call this URL, and it will put the data in the body automatically. Why? Again, because this form tag already knows what to do. Okay. In our example that I showed you, we had to do everything manually, put it in the body in our Postman, but the form already knows what to do if you give in the right method and you call the right URL. What it does is it will take whatever you type it in, and then it's going to create a post request, put all this data in the body, and then call this URL /thanks. All right. On my server, what's happening on my server side? I should have a URL /thanks, right? And then I'm going to use my two methods, which were end and data. Okay, same code, .on if the data, when the data is coming in. So I'm just adding that data, same thing. These are all just HTML, but this is what I'm doing. I'm getting my data back, okay, same thing. And then on my end, you can just console log this out. Okay, this is taking that data and sending it back to verify, but you could console log this data out You will see it on your console. Okay? It's the same thing that I just showed you. The only thing was this form thing. Okay, read up on the HTML form. They are super important. Now they are coming important. Remember we were using form, but we were kind of ignoring these things. Now these are important because they have the ability to post the information back. Okay? So I would highly recommend look at post is a tricky method and probably a lot of people ignore it, but post is really important. So please make sure when you come in Saturday, understand it. On Saturday you will be looking into Express. Again, today was more about the concept. I want to make sure you guys understand what is going on. All this code that you saw, Express kind of does it better. It's a third-party library. Somebody else has come up with all these methods. They have kind of make it nicer. If you want, read up on Express. But on Saturday, you will be looking into Express. And then when I see you guys on Tuesday, we will build a whole project from front end. We'll build a whole full stack project. Okay? Yes.
What exactly in the form when you're showing the action path to the thanks? What is this? How is that actually? What is that actually doing?
So what it is doing is so form your browser. Again, this HTML is being rendered by your browser, right? And a browser, your Chrome browser, have their own JavaScript engine that kind of recognizes these tags behind the scenes. So what it does is if you type in these two, what it does is behind the scenes, it says, oh, I need to make a post request to this URL, and this is the data that I need to send. So what it does is it exactly does the same thing that we saw in Postman. You put in this URL, and in the body it is putting your form fields, whatever the name, address, whatever it is, and then it just sends the data into your server to this URL. That's what it does. It just kind of hides that information from you, but it is doing the exact same thing that we did in Postman over here. It creates a request, it puts this data in the body. There is nowhere else this data is going to go. Behind the scene, it creates that HTTP request, puts all this data. When you click the submit button, it creates a body and then sends it off to your server. Okay, on your server side, you are still using the same code, dot on. Okay, dot on data, dot on end. Same thing that we saw. Data is when the data as the data is coming in, and this will be called when it is complete. So you can just do a console log for whatever data that comes over here on your end.
So,
Yeah. Well, actually.